What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you are now tuning into a new video on my channel. It's now 2025, and I want to make sure that we kick off this year in a big way. So I wanted to start off by giving you all a topic based on a movie that I watched over this past break. So over this break, I had some time to watch and get caught up on some of the Dragon Ball Z or Dragonball Suepr, whichever you would like to call it, movies. And I recently watched the Dragonball Suepr Broly Movie. And I wanted to give a quick review, but specifically an analysis on how this movie closely related to American chattel slavery. So let's get into it. I'll be honest with y'all. When I first heard that this movie was coming out back in 2018, I really wasn't all that thrilled because I had already seen the Broly movie that they had done back when the Dragon Ball Z series was out. I already knew about the character. I already knew that he was pissed off that Goku woke him up as a baby and all this other stuff, and he kept crying. I already know that he was angry as hell. I already knew that he was a legendary Super Saiyan. So all of that stuff made me feel like this was just super redundant and it was unnecessary. And I knew ultimately the main reason why they were redoing the Broly story was because they were trying to make Broly a canon character, because essentially the characters that are in the Dragon Ball Z movies were not canon characters, or at least that was my understanding of it. Regardless, I went ahead and I had a chance to check it out. And I will say that this was a good movie and I did enjoy it thoroughly, and I thought that it really connected the story a lot better than the story that they had told in the Dragon Ball Z series. And it also connected all of the dots when it came to some of the other movies as well too, because a lot of us knew that Frieza blew up planet Vegeta and he wiped out the Saiyan race for the most part. And then there were certain Saiyans that stayed alive and that caused the events that happened going forward, on Namek and everything else related to him. So, we knew the story, but a lot of the dots weren't connected. But this movie literally mapped out everything that happened from start to finish. So you understood kind of what all went down. It was almost to the point where this movie wasn't even really a Broly movie, but more so a movie about the origins of the Saiyans and the destruction of the Saiyans. So that's why I felt like it did a good job of connecting the dots. And really, it didn't even become about Broly so much until maybe the middle to the end, because that's when we seen how he became as an adult and whatnot. Now, before I go into my analysis of this movie, there's a few things that I would like for y'all to keep in mind as you all are listening to this video. Number one, there are going to be times where I'm going to go back to certain Dragon Ball Z episodes and things like that, and maybe even some movies to make connections between what I have been seeing. Another thing that I need you all to keep in mind is that when you watch any type of movie or television show, whether it is something that's anime based or something that's just American television based or whatever the case may be, there tends to be a lot of allegories in the storytelling. And Dragon Ball Z is one of the most heavily allegorical series that I think I have ever seen. And a lot of their allegories actually are related to what has happened when it comes to slavery and what happened when it comes to black people in history. So what this tells you is that the dominant society is not the only group that has an understanding of what has happened in history and their role in it. But even other societies, such as the Japanese in this case, are also privy to some of the things that have happened, because they often in their lore take from the methodology of the lore of the dominant society. They tend to do the same things. They tend to tell a lot of allegories, and they tend to take characters that are non-black and give them black features, or an origin story that is related to that of black people in some way. There are a bunch of key things that went on in this movie that tell you that there was some type of close study of American chattel slavery. And to start off, let's just look at Frieza and then the Saiyans. Frieza, throughout this entire movie and probably throughout the entirety of the Dragon Ball series, is an allegory for the white supremacist. And his whole family are white supremacists essentially as well too. When you look at the Saiyans, they are essentially in this movie, and really the rest of the Dragon Ball series, an allegory for foundational Black Americans specifically. And I'm going to go into the nuances of why I say that. Now, and I will say there may be one time I may deviate and say, hey, this kind of covers some of the diaspora as well too, but I'm going to stick to foundational Black Americans specifically in this case. The first sign that tells you that this was about American chattel slavery is you can look at the clothing. Look at Frieza's armor. He has this kind of purple armor thing with these kind of spiky shoulders and whatnot. You've seen the same gear before where it looks like there's a certain type of like armor that they have on. So see, like I said, Frieza's is purple and his dad also has it on as well too. But look at the other Saiyans. A lot of them also were wearing that. To me, this isn't just something that reminds me of clothing. Now, one could say that, you know, this is a Eurocentric thing because look at the clothes that a lot of Black Americans wear. It comes from Eurocentrism, especially the way that, you know, we're expected to dress and style and stuff like that. But I would almost say, not only do I disagree, but I think it's much deeper than the way that it's being put. I think that this is actually an allegory for them having certain customs in the dominant society that Black people have chosen to uphold. Think about all the holidays and things like that we've celebrated all over the years and the things that we continue to celebrate now, such as Thanksgiving, where these holidays were clearly about genocide of a race of people. But here we are celebrating it the same way that the dominant society in the West and really all over the globe celebrates it. So these are things that were given to Black people and they're still practicing as a custom, which is why you see people such as Vegeta and Bardock and people like that still wearing that same almost uniform that you see on Frieza, but with different colors. Now, the other thing that I would also say with that as well too is look at the way that even in modern society, we try to take the customs that we're used to celebrating because of the dominant society and we try to make it our own thing while still celebrating it. So consider how, like, let's use the example of Thanksgiving, how we would celebrate this holiday as if we were giving thanks to people, right? And this was something that Black Americans were doing. But now you have people doing things such as Friendsgiving, where now you'll have your friends over. So it's not like a thing of you're celebrating Thanksgiving itself where you're cutting turkey and it's about pilgrims and giving thanks and all this other shit. But this idea of we're getting together with community, with people who we actually like to talk to and deal with and things like that. But it's not necessarily around this idea of thanks. It's around the idea that this is the time where we get to celebrate our time with family and friends and people that we love while we have a day off of work. So if you look at things like look at how like Vegeta's outfit went from being like Frieza's but a different color scheme. You know, it went from having the spiky shoulders to him getting rid of the spiky shoulders altogether. But look at some of Vegeta's outfits even in the Android and Cell saga. It's as if he's wearing that Saiyan armor, or I guess this Frieza armor in this case, but he doesn't have the shoulder pads. So it shows you that he's still changing up his customs while keeping things similar to the shell of what it was from when the dominant society created it. So basically when Frieza was the one that had a lot of the Saiyans wearing this outfit, he took that style, changed it a bit, but kept the shell of it basically the same. And we in our society do very similar things where we're celebrating a holiday that essentially was about genocide or was just totally anti-Black. And here we are trying to make it our own and finding a way to celebrate it in a way that makes sense to us. Also, Frieza represents the white supremacist or white supremacy, because think about how a lot of his actions were seen as hatred, but essentially were based totally around fear. It's the same way that the dominant society operates in our regular world. A lot of them have a fear of genetic annihilation. So their big thing is making sure that they are superior to others because of this inferior complex that they have within themselves. The dominant society has an innate fear that they are going to be overthrown and overcome. And essentially we are going, as foundational Black Americans and really as Black people as a whole, are going to do to them what they've done to us. And the three main people who they are afraid of are those who are well-to-do, they are afraid of those who are pro-Black, and they are afraid of those who are athletically gifted. And in this movie, you can kind of see that, because well-to-do would be like Vegeta and his family. You can see the pro-black in this case would be like Bardock, because he was onto Frieza and what he was trying to do. And also he had a plan for wanting his son Kakarot, that being Goku, to survive. And then athletically gifted would be like Broly in this case, because Broly was the legendary Super Saiyan and he had more power than all of the other Saiyans, because even as a baby, he was surpassing the power of Prince Vegeta, although they had invested so much time and energy into making sure that he was the most powerful of Saiyans once he became older. So you can see that even with that, there was a level of fear there as well too. Even consider Frieza's actions when he was trying to eradicate the Saiyans after it had been found out that he had been fearful of them. Think about the fact that he didn't really kill off all the Saiyans, he just killed off a great majority. This is much like the population control and tailoring that goes on with the dominant society and black people, specifically in the United States. Foundational black Americans. Think about how they have tried to keep the population of foundational black Americans at bay since the 1700s. So what this shows you is that there is a level of fear of having these black people arise and overthrow them, because again, they assume that we are going to do to them what they have done to us. But at the same time, they don't want them fully eradicated, because the whole mission of white supremacy is to control and to dominate others. This is the reason why they keep some black people around, because they want to be able to dominate these individuals to do their bidding and to do things that are either against their will or things that they normally wouldn't do had they not been colonized. So Frieza was the same way, which is why he kept people such as Vegeta, Nappa, Raditz, and individuals like that alive to continue to do his bidding, despite also them knowing about what he actually was doing. Also consider that Frieza's race was called the Changelings. So in this case, the Changelings, if you all do not know, were basically these lizard-like creatures that had names that were associated with cold things or cold containment centers, which is why Frieza was called Frieza, his brother was called Cooler, and then his father was called King Cold. And we can even go into how Frost from the other universe was called Frost himself, but we'll just stick to Frieza right now so we don't confuse things and make things kind of weird. But think about how he was the most known and hateful of his family, and how he was a white lizard-looking creature, again, with a cold name. Also notice that there weren't very many changelings as well too, because there were only 4 that we knew of and 3 in the universe that we mostly were looking at as we've seen Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball Super throughout all these years. So what that shows you is that it's related to how the dominant society, not just in the US, but globally, is only 9% of the population. So it shows you that this small minority of individuals is dominating other individuals who don't even look like them because of their level of fear. And it's also being disguised as something that is either hateful or even powerful for that matter. Even consider the fear beyond Broly, because one could even say, the fear of Broly being too strong was something that the Saiyans themselves feared. But I would go back and I would say it's something that Frieza also didn't really want to deal with as well too, because think about how Frieza was when he was fighting Broly. After Broly started tagging that ass, he didn't really want no parts of it. But even before that, think about how he was fearful of the Saiyans even turning into monkeys, almost mocking them and calling them monkeys, the same way that the whites in the dominant society, those who practice white supremacy, will call us all types of derogatory names. I don't have to say them here. We all know what they are, and we all know what it sounds like. And as foundational black Americans and all black people, we know what it feels like. But the point that I'm making is that these people in the dominant society, they do this because there is a fear of us becoming powerful any way that we can, which is why he had a fear of the type of power that somebody like a Saiyan could possess. That being Super Saiyan being the main thing that they were afraid of. Because think about it. He was afraid of the Super Saiyan thing becoming real. He thought that it was a real thing, although other people were trying to portray it as if it was some sort of myth. And even if you look at the whole Super Saiyan thing, even that is kind of weird and complex as well too. Because think about it, when a person goes Super Saiyan, they have blonde hair and then they have blue eyes. But that's interesting because it's almost as if the dominant society, to a certain extent, but I guess in this case, it would be Japanese writers because they're the ones who created this, are making it so that the dominant society is being seen as the individuals who are at the supremacy of power itself. So in order for somebody to be this anomaly of power, they have to have blonde hair and blue eyes, almost as if we're going back to this eugenics theory and this idea that those who are blonde hair and blue eyes are the ones who are the most superior. So it's almost as if they've now taken these Saiyans, who are allegories for foundational Black Americans. They almost have the appearance of somebody who is white. Also, take a look at Frieza's minions. I don't know if you ever picked up on this, but a lot of his very close minions, like the ones who were stronger, the ones who he held in higher regard than the others, they all had puns. They had names that were puns on different food items. As a matter of fact, it was very specific. The somewhat lower level ones were the kind of lower medium level soldiers had names that were puns on fruit. And then the higher level ones, like the Ginyu Force, were puns on dairy products. And notice that all of these things have to be refrigerated in order for them to stay good so that they do not perish sooner. This is very interesting because what it shows you is that in order for these individuals, in this case fruits and dairy products, to stay in power, or in this case to stay good, they have to be powered by something that is cold. And in this case, they have to be powered by the dominant society. So this is an allegory for how the dominant society, that being Frieza, even pulls rank on individuals who are not like him. So they are essentially allegories for all of these other individuals that come over from different countries. So you're looking at the Indians, you're looking at the Arabs, you're looking at the Hispanics, you're looking at the Asians. So these are all these buffer groups who come over and they act just like the dominant society, and they do their bidding, and they do their bidding against foundational Black Americans when they come over here, which is why we then turn around and we call these individuals tethers. So these are essentially the tethers of society, those who will do the bidding of the dominant society because they either fear them or they want to have the benefits of them. So they're almost pretending like they themselves are actually a part of the dominant society. So that's what these characters who are represented by fruit names and dairy products essentially are an allegory for. And if you don't believe me, you think that I'm talking a bunch of hoopla and all this other shit, then look it up for yourself, because I can go through it with you right now so you understand. Look from at the bottom soldiers. You had Kui, which is like kiwi. You had Apule, which is like apple. You had Dodoria, which is like the durian fruit. And you had Zarbon, which is like Zaban, which is a Japanese word for the pomelo fruit. And then look at the Ginyu Force. Goldo's name was based on yogurt. Jace's name was based on cheese. Birder's name was based on butter. Raccoon's name was based on cream. And Captain Ginyu's name was based on milk. So these are all dairy products, as I just said. Even when you break down the dynamics of Frieza versus his father, they are both white supremacists, but they're different white supremacists, because you have some white supremacists who are like those good cop white supremacists, and you have some that are like the bad cop ones. Frieza represents more of that bad cop white supremacist who is blatantly hateful. They are overt with their white supremacy, almost somewhat like a KKK type of member, like the alt-right, like the very extreme ones. And then you have these white supremacists that are like a handshake and a smile, which is like King Cold. Because notice that King Cold had a presentation that was a little bit more pleasant when he was talking to the Saiyans. But then let's reference back to when he was fighting with Trunks, or when he was having his encounter with Trunks. At some point, remember, he called Trunks a dirty little Saiyan. It's almost as if he was getting mad and impatient that Trunks wasn't complying with the things that he was saying, because he essentially wanted to kill Trunks just like his son did. His son was just upfront about the way that he felt. And again, this is dangerous, and this shows the dynamic in the United States as well too, because you have these white supremacists who will act like they are the allies or their friends or they're peaceful or individuals who actually care about black people, when they're actually the ones who are pulling the strings, calling all the shots, and also depleting the resources and oppressing other people behind the scenes without other people really getting in their asses. So you have these individuals who are playing like the good guys when they're essentially worse than even those who are more hateful. In this case, the Frieza examples. Now let's talk about the Saiyans. Think about Bardock, for example. Bardock was your example of your kind of pro-black, foundational black American. He was on code, and he knew good and well what was going on with Frieza and what he was planning to do. And he prepared his family in a way where they would, be safe, where his lineage and where his progeny would be able to have a safe environment, which is why he sent Kakarot, also known as Goku, away. But remember that before Frieza was going to destroy the planet, he was willing to fight back against Frieza, which shows that us pro-blacks, when it comes down to the wire and we know that we are in a real race war, we will fight back against the dominant society as Bardock did. These are the types of individuals that people like the Friezas actually fear, because they are revolutionaries, people who will start uprisings, people who would say, we are going to fight back against you after everything that you have done to us. So that was essentially what was going on with the Bardock character. And it's interesting because that justice-like spirit was actually passed on to his son without him actually knowing it. Then think about characters like King Vegeta. King Vegeta in this example was the well-to-do black person in America. And in a way, too, I'm going to kind of pivot. Like I said, in some cases, I might kind of add in little nuances. King Vegeta was somewhat of like one of those black folks who are in the diaspora who have a certain level of power, or at least the perception of such, but has been given to them by somebody in the dominant society, and they do all of their bidding. King Vegeta was essentially on that, and he was willing even to do things that would harm and also disenfranchise his own people, even if it meant that somebody could possibly get ahead, or somebody also had maybe some type of advantage that would help them to create some type of power. This is seen when there's this showing of jealousy when he finds out that Paragus' son Broly is actually stronger than his son Vegeta, and he sends him away out of jealousy. So there's this level of him feeling like this is something that could potentially be a problem later down the line, especially when it comes to what's happening with him having some type of status and power because of Frieza and his father. It's much like in the United States also as well too, where you have these boule Negroes who act like they are the gatekeepers and the individuals who can regulate opportunities in black society and also pull rank on what it means to be black and empowered, which ultimately goes to this thing of excellence versus actual empowerment. So he essentially is in the lines of, again, a mix of between that black boule in American society and those African and even Caribbean leaders who are really leaders who are doing bidding for the dominant society, for the white supremacists. The character Paragus is also interesting as well too. Paragus, if you all do not know, if I did not say it already, is the father of Broly. Paragus is basically what I would call an old Negro. Paragus is an individual just like the old Negroes who raises a kid, or barely raises a kid, I guess in his case, which again is much like a lot of the old Negroes in American society who basically are aware of the atrocities that have gone on as a result of oppression via the white supremacists. But what they essentially do is they use their kids as a tool to be able to have a cash cow. It's like what I've called before the Black Promised Land trope. It's when you basically gamble on your kids doing something on a whim, so hopefully they come back and they're able to serve you in a certain way instead of actually doing things that help serve your progeny in a way where they can survive and ultimately thrive. Paragus was not a fighter. He did not fight back whatsoever. As a matter of fact, even in his old age, as he got older, he was weak. He never even became a Super Saiyan whatsoever. So Paragus essentially had no power. And what did he do when he found out that Frieza was revived? He was running right back to him, trying to say, here's my son, let me introduce you to him. There's a lot of things that we can do for you. Is there a position that you can basically get for me? So essentially, he's just like the old Negroes that we have today. A bunch of Uncle Ruckuses who really don't care that much about black empowerment, but how they themselves can actually have a come up and how they can have a peaceful life, capitulating to the dominant society. To some extent too with this movie and really in the rest of the series, there's a level of Stockholm syndrome going on as well too, because it feels like they're always doing things that end up rescuing Frieza over and over again, allowing him to live. And this is also covered too when Vegeta is mad at Goku because he allowed Frieza basically to live post what happened in the Tournament of Power. So it's almost as if they're allowing the oppressor to continue to thrive despite everything that they have done. And this kind of goes back to this wheel of foundational Black Americans to accept and love on everybody despite all the bad things that they do to us and despite the horrible things that they've done to us on the basis of race. It's almost as if despite all those bad things, we would not go back and do the same thing despite, again, the insecurities that are in the minds of these white supremacists that we would actually do that. Frieza is an example of this because, again, there's been many times where Goku specifically, and I'll say Vegeta maybe by proxy because he went along with it at some point, have allowed Frieza to slide despite all of the bad things that he has actually done to them. Broly kind of reminds me of a Black American millennial to a certain extent. An individual who obviously, although is an adult, still has the mindset of being super loyal to individuals who are doing nothing but using them and not trying to do anything to benefit them in the long run. Look at how loyal he is to his father despite how horribly his father treats him. And even when Frieza actually kills his father, he's ready to go on a rampage because Frieza again knew that by provoking him that it would unlock all of Broly's power. What Frieza didn't expect is that he would unleash it on him as well too. But ultimately the point is that he had a certain loyalty to his father despite the fact that he was a horrible person who really didn't want to do anything for Broly specifically. He only basically let him go so Broly could thrive and later be an aid to him. But look at Broly just as a whole. He's confused, but he seems to kind of want to make a difference in his own way. He seems to be justice oriented himself as well too. Think about when he saves the green girl who was really nice to him, who was who was working for Frieza and whatnot, and how she was getting bullied and he stood up for her. So he kind of has that justice mind, just like a lot of us millennials do. The thing about us Black millennials is we are the generation of confused activists. We're individuals who want to make a difference but don't know how to do it properly. And for Black American millennials, the thing that we really want to know is how can we make a difference that empowers Black people? So a lot of us go different avenues. Some of us become pro-Black. Some of us get into that seat of the table territory. Some of us get into this people of color shit. Some of us, we all have our own different ways, but ultimately there's a certain level of justice that millennials can appreciate, and Broly symbolizes that to a certain extent. There's a childlikeness, there's a childlike behavior and thought process to him because, again, there's a level of confusion because he has been isolated so much and left in the dark about what has happened in history. What's also interesting to me about the Saiyan race is two things. Number one, despite everything that Frieza has done to the planet and to them and controlled them and oppressed them, think about all the accomplishments that they have made. Think about the fact that Super Saiyan still came alive despite everything he did to stop it from actually happening and the way that it defeated him and actually killed off his empire quite a bit. That's what the dominant society really fears, because think about the idea that Black Americans have invented so many great things, so many different accomplishments that we've had, and so many feats that we've actually reached, despite the fact that we've been oppressed and that other people have done things to stop us from having the resources we needed to succeed in society and also to be competitive with other groups of people. We have been able to achieve that, and that continuously surprises Frieza, and it also surprises the white supremacists in America, which is why they have to quickly find ways to try to steal and sneak those things so that they can take it for themselves as if it's their own thing, and they try to rewrite history. And also think about the way that they also lie as well too. Frieza also lied when he was talking to Paragus when he said that the Saiyan's planet had been destroyed by an asteroid. It kind of reminds me of revisionist history when it comes to the dominant society and how they lie about the events that have taken place. They lie about the whole slavery thing. They lie about the whole thing with Abraham Lincoln. They lie about all these different things about our history and the benefits that they gave us. They lie about who built the country. So we can even go far with that to show how Frieza is similar to a white supremacist because he's also lying about the way that history actually went down. What I mean by accomplishments in this case would be the fact that these Saiyans were actually able to go super, and they were actually able to achieve new forms despite the fact that they have been put down and all this other stuff. Now, the other thing that I want to kind of say as well too is it's interesting to me how with Frieza, how although he killed off all those Saiyans, the population of Saiyans is still bigger than the population of changelings. Think about it. You have Frieza, King Cold, and you also have Cooler. But then now for Saiyans, you have Goku, Vegeta, Broly, Gohan, Goten, Trunks, Pan. I could keep going, but you have all these Saiyans who are actually still around despite what Frieza has done. And I know a lot of you all are going to watch this video and y'all are going to say weird things like, Cool Colas, you're missing the point because Piccolo was black and all this other stuff. And before you all get into babbling about that, I want to make something very clear. You all have got to stop looking at something so clear cut. When it comes to the lore that people put out, they tend to put pieces of our history and us into different characters in different ways. Dragon Ball Z is just one of the places where this shows up. So there are allegories related to black people when it comes to not just Piccolo, but the Namekians as a whole. And there are allegories related to black people that are within the Saiyans as a whole as well too. They're just done differently. You can see the ties between the Saiyans and black Americans, and you can see the ties between the Namekians and black people in history, especially from a spiritual standpoint and the ways that, you know, we have manifested ourselves all over the globe. So you can see that a lot with the Namekians, but I can do that in a totally different video. I just want to make sure that we're talking about the Broly movie specifically in this context. Ultimately, there is a lot to unpack. I won't lie to you, but the basis and what I'm basically trying to get you all to understand is that when you watch a lot of these movies, it's not just a piece of entertainment. It's actually a piece of history showing itself in an allegorical way. But what I encourage us as black people to do is find ways to create our own lore so we can tell our own stories and we don't have people making us as allegories and not also doing anything to benefit our society despite using our history to be able to create their content. All right, y'all, I hope you all enjoyed this video and I hope you all enjoyed what I had to say. When you're finished, if you like this video, I would love it if you could like the video, subscribe, share this, hit the bell icon so you get notifications for whenever I come out with new content on this channel. Other than that, I will talk to y'all later. Peace.